Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for August 21st, 2017. On today's show, there really isn't any news worth talking about, so I took to Twitter. We asked for your questions. We're going to do an all-mailbag episode, and we're going to try to answer your questions. On today's episode, I have with me Ben Pearson.
Hey, how's it going?
Jack Giroux.
Thanks for having me.
And Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And, of course, I'm Peter Sciretta. As always, with the mailbox, you can send your questions to peter@slashfilm.com. Leave your name and general geographic location. And in case we mention on there, we can mention who sent it in. Max asks, what is your favorite theme park ride? Ben, what is yours?
Mine is an easy one. It's the Indiana Jones adventure at Disneyland. I actually have the artwork for the ride that was done by Drew Struzan framed on my wall right now because it's a really awesome Indiana Jones poster, and it has like the Jeep and stuff that you ride, the ride vehicle on there, and it has the audience with Indy and a whip and the idol with one eye and everything in the background. It's a really cool piece of art. You should check that out. Just Google image search it. But yeah, I love this ride. It's I was thinking about this, and if you would have asked me this question 10 years ago or something, I almost certainly would have given a roller coaster as an answer. But the older I get, the less capable I am of riding roller coasters. I think just like my personal constitution is not, I'm not up for it anymore, man. It just messes with my stomach too much. So this one is like a good mix of like, I love all of the whole vibe of the ride, and it doesn't like flip you upside down and corkscrew you or anything like that. So yeah, it's a good one for me.
That is a good ride. Speaking of roller coasters, Brad, what is your favorite ride?
Gotta go with Space Mountain, man. It's a classic. It's a really fun roller coaster. It's not, a crazy Daredevil roller coaster, but it's cool because it's indoor and it goes dark, and it's got the cool, lighting system and everything. Makes you feel like you're going through hyperspace. I've just always liked it.
Have you gone on both Space Mountains, Florida and Anaheim?
No, I've actually never been to Disney World, so I haven't been to Florida yet.
My favorite ride is probably Pirates of the Caribbean. I am theme over thrill. 9 out of 10 times. I want to be immersed in another world, and which is probably why in a couple of years my answer will change to Star Wars Land. But for right now, I really enjoy Pirates of the Caribbean. Jack, what is your favorite theme park ride?
My favorite theme park ride is the Anaconda at King's Dominion in Richmond, Virginia.
What is that?
I'm not a big theme park guy, but it's just a big roller coaster where a lot of loops, goes real fast, real aggressive. You go in like a tunnel underground, and just like a piercing noise hits your ears. And I just remember so many times where I would go to that theme park and just get on that ride again and again. And I'd probably pick that one mostly just because good memories. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite theme parks too. I actually just found out that Danny McBride worked there for a few years, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool. I just went to the LA County Fair over the weekend, and looking at all these rides that just whip you around, going back to what Ben says, as a kid, I wanted to experience all that. But nowadays, I'm like, I don't want to be whipped around.
It's a younger man's game, Peter.
I mean, I can still see the appeal of a roller coaster. I want to go fast and up and down, but I don't see these things that have an arm on it and just throw you around like a rag doll. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why do people want to experience that? I don't know. Okay, let's move on. Another question. Tim L asks, what movies and people do you consider award contenders for those for those movies that have already been released this year? For me, the number one would be War for the Planet of the Apes. I think that this trilogy and this movie should get recognized by the Academy, either be it with Best Picture, which is maybe a slim option, be it with Best Director, Matt Reeves, and if not that, the Academy needs to recognize Andy Serkis's work, his performance capture work. I feel like he has been snubbed so many times. I think this is one, in my mind, one of the best trilogies, the best trilogy since Indiana Jones for me. And, Lord of the Rings got all those awards the last time around. I think this is time for War for the Planet of the Apes, but it's probably not going to happen.
So I'm not a huge Oscar expert, but I think as far as the stuff that's come out so far, I can't think of anything that would be more of a lock than Get Out, Jordan Peele's first directorial debut. And I'm
Ben,
not sure whether
Oscar's so white.
Well, that's part of the reason that I'm so confident that it's going to be recognized in some form, is because in response to Oscar So White, a lot more people have joined the Academy since then. People of color, they've really made an effort to increase the diversity in the ranks of the people who are going to be voting for the Oscars this year. So I think, and that's not to take anything away from Get Out, which I think is a legitimately great movie on its own. But I think that it has a chance maybe for Best Picture. It's one of those movies that it came out early this year, but people are still talking about it now. I imagine it's going to hold all the way through, and I would not be surprised to see it get like a writing nomination or maybe even like a Best Director nomination too. So that's the one I would put money on.
Brad, we know what your answer is.
I mean, would you know what my answer was before you saw it?
I would. If I looked at your Twitter feed, I would just know.
Peter, I haven't said a lick about this movie at all, ever. So
it's not like you're not quoted on the trailer or on all the advertising ever, anywhere. I go on IMDb, there's a quote from you.
It is. It's The Big Sick. It's seriously, it has to be The Big Sick. The movie it's fantastic all around. It's so good, and I'm not sure. I hope that it has the chance of getting a Best Picture nomination. I feel like it has the legs to, if only because it's the angle in which it presents a romantic comedy is so different from what you usually expect from romantic comedy. It has cultural relevance, and it connects to people on a different level than most romantic comedies do. It's like the pull quote I have says, it's extremely authentic. It feels very true to life, and you fall in love with these characters, and you're with them every step of the way. And so if it's not big enough to get a Best Picture nomination, I think it's almost a lock to get a Best Original Screenplay nomination for sure.
I love that movie, but I am not confident enough in the Academy to recognize it. Jack, what is your pick?
My pick is Dunkirk, which I don't know if I would have picked Dunkirk if I didn't see it in IMAX recently, which I thought actually made it a better movie for me. And I just think it's incredible. And my only thing about that movie is I don't think it will get rewarded in some categories I think it deserves to, like the writing or the performances, because I think it's subdued in a lot of ways. You don't get those big war speeches or the things you usually see in the Oscar clips. So I don't think, you'd see Mark Rylance nominated, even though I feel like he should be. But I feel like that movie in almost every category should be recognized.
I mean, it definitely seems like this is Chris Nolan's big play for that gold statue. Like, it reeks of, like, I need it, guys. I really, really need that statue. I'll give my opinion on Dunkirk later on. Let's move on to the next question. Robert asks, best upcoming TV shows for autumn/winter. What show are you most excited for? I'm going to kind of cheat here. And I know a bunch of you are saying new shows, but Stranger Things 2 is the show that I am most anticipating coming out this Halloween. Obviously, Stranger Things is a huge phenomenon, and I want to see what happens next. I'm looking forward to this show, and they're promoting it like a sequel. And I'm looking forward to this show much in the same way I would a highly anticipated movie sequel.
I would say of the new shows that are coming up, The Deuce looks the most interesting to me, and that's the one from David Simon, who's the guy behind The Wire. It takes place in the 1970s in New York during like the rise of the porn industry in Times Square and all that. And James Franco plays two characters. Maggie Gyllenhaal is in it. It has a really good cast. And yeah, just the idea of David Simon returning to HBO for a new show is something that definitely piques my interest.
I also went with a new show because it's so easy to pick a show that you already love that you're excited to come back, Peter. So I went with a show called AP Bio, which is a new
I've never
comedy.
even heard of this. What is this show?
It's a new network comedy that will be coming. I don't think it's coming out in the fall, but I think it's a mid-season series that's coming to NBC. It's going to star Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Patton Oswalt. And it also comes from a bunch of Saturday Night Live people. Seth Meyers, Michael Bryan, Lorne Michaels, and Mike Shoemaker are all producers on it. So it's as a huge comedy nerd, I'm very excited to see how it turns out.
And Jack, what is your answer?
My answer is the 9th season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and it's been such a long wait, like 6 years. But between those 6 years, I've rewatched that show so many times, and I just can't get enough of it. Like, there's not a weak season to me. I just always find it funny, so I'm looking forward to those 10 episodes of just laughing my ass off.
Do you think that Curb will have to change with the times? Like, I feel like it's a much different time now than it was before, when that show was first on.
I feel like if it was a new show, people would respond differently to the character Larry David. But I feel like people know what to expect from him now in that show's style of humor, that I don't think there will be too many complaints, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, for sure. Mike asks, what is your favorite guilty pleasure TV show? I will start this one out because me and my girlfriend Kitra, we watch a bunch of Bravo. She watches more Bravo than me, and I think I've mentioned in a previous podcast I watch $1 Million Listing New York, which is kind of like following these real estate agents in New York, and it's a really bad reality show. The other really bad reality show that I love, and this is probably my favorite, is on Bravo. It's called Flipping Out, and it follows this designer, Jeff Lewis, who, when the show first started, he basically was flipping houses in LA, and he's grown into becoming more of a designer for hire, and it follows him and his team, and he is kind of a dickhead and an asshole to his team, and part of the fun of the show is watching that. But yeah, that just came back on last night. I was super excited to watch that show. Ben, what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
So I'm going to be the douchebag on this episode who says nothing. I don't have one. You guys were giving me a hard time about this before we started recording, and the reason I don't have one is because
Ben only watches good stuff.
Everything I watch is so cool. My God, I'm the coolest person in Slash Film.
So basically, the answer is all of the TV is so good right now, and all of the stuff that my wife and I watch is like funneled through these expectations from other people or just from like, you know, our own personal preferences or whatever. We don't have a ton of time to watch stuff together, so we just sort of make it count, and we don't really have guilty pleasure TV shows that are just like, oh, you throw on in the background, and like I don't really watch anything while I'm working or anything like that. I know a lot of people do, so I just don't really have the time for
no reality shows of any kind.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like I used to work in reality television. And
what did you do in reality TV?
Oh God! So I transcribed footage, like the raw tapes that were shot out in the field, because the network, every network needs a record of all of the stuff that was captured on every tape, regardless of whether or not it actually ends up in the final show, just for legal purposes. So they need somebody to go through and watch all of those tapes and write down what everyone is saying. So that was me and a bunch of other.
Shit. That's awful.
Yes, it was. But
and that's not even the job of the closed captioning. Like, this is just for internal use.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's not even as important as the closed captioning person.
That's like one of those jobs that you never would even think exists.
Right. Yeah, and I also like did like lunch runs and stuff for the editors who were working in the production company on whatever show. Garbage. I'm talking like really bad stuff, like Hogan knows best, Brooke Knows Best, like the Hulk Hogan's daughter, that kind of show. Yeah, it was really, really terrible. So anyway, being on the inside and seeing how all of these reality TV shows are constructed and like overproduced and like all created, and like seeing the raw footage, even if I wasn't there out in the field, I could hear the audio from all of the people who are like, actually take a few steps over to the other side, and like they're just like setting up these situations trying to generate this fake drama. So even if I did watch any reality stuff before that, as soon as I saw how it worked from the inside out, I can't bring myself to watch any reality based thing ever again. So Yeah, I know. Typically, reality TV is like the guilty pleasure stuff, just because people like to sort of fall in and get sucked into the drama and stuff like that. But I just can't do it.
So what Ben's saying is he's looking down upon all of our answers.
No, it's not that. It's just if you guys had seen, man, I've seen some shit. If you guys have seen what I've seen, man, you would know.
Things, man. I've seen some stuff.
Yeah.
Brad, what is your guilty pleasure?
I've talked about this on the water cooler before because it just started a new season this summer. I watched Big Brother, and you're just gonna have to accept it and deal with it. It's honestly it's a really fun show. It's I like the interplay between like physical challenges and the mental and social game that comes with it. There's a lot of lying and deception that you have to do to actually get through the game. There's always something like crazy happening each week. It's a really fun show. Like it's by no means high quality television, but I always have fun watching it. And yeah, it's really fun right now. And for anybody else who happens to watch, who listens, I hate Cody. I'm so glad that he got evicted.
I'm so glad I don't get that reference. Jack, what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
My favorite guilty pleasure, and I'm actually going to go with the tie, but Californication and Weeds. And like Ben, I don't have time for too many shows that I don't really like, but those are two shows that I didn't even finish, but I liked when they were first on until they both went on for far too long. But I'll still find myself every now and then throwing on an episode, and I'll feel guilty in the sense of I could probably be watching something else like more enjoyable and better, but it's just so casually watchable. Like it just passes the time. And every once in a while, especially the early episodes, there's fun to them. But I do feel a little bit of guilt when I watch those, even though I don't believe in guilty pleasures.
That first season of Californication, I think, is actually a good show.
Yeah, I agree.
The later seasons, not so much. But I still watched it.
Yeah, you just don't need 6 or 7 seasons about that kind of character.
Yeah. Okay, Brett A. asks, what can Marvel TV learn from the MCU as their latest shows have taken a sharp drop in quality since the MCU Marvel split? I'm not even sure what MCU Marvel split he's talking about, but I think none of you watched Marvel television shows, right? Is that correct?
That is correct.
I haven't watched any of the Netflix shows. I used to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then I gave up on it.
Yeah.
I gave up on Daredevil, too, after somewhere by the end of season 2.
Well, what can Marvel TV learn from the MCU? I think they could learn to get rid of Jeff Loeb and have Kevin Feige oversee Marvel television. I think, honestly, no, a real answer to that question, I think, is... and I guess I'm the only one that can answer this on this podcast. They need to make this more fun. I don't think a lot of these shows are fun. And I also don't think, the hashtag this is all connect or it's all connected or whatever the hell Jeff Loeb likes to say and pretend is real but isn't. It isn't real. Like I want to see it to be more connected. Like I would love to see Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where like it actually, you got to see them cleaning up after, stuff that happens in the movies. And it doesn't have to be like all about the movies, but like I want to actually feel like it's one world. And the fact that there's this division is the same reason why I have very little interest in the Sony Spider-Man universe as well. So that would be my answer, is make it fun and let's actually make it connected and not just say that. And also, we should just cancel that Inhuman show. It looks bad.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think Inhumans looks fantastic.
You can read Brad's article on Inhumans from Comic-Con where you can tell that he is kidding. Okay, moving on. David R. asks, controversial, but what are some movies that you just don't understand people hating or loving? Love the podcast, by the way. I'll start this out. Man of Steel is a movie that I love, and I don't understand. I understand why people don't love it, but I don't understand why people hate it. Now, I understand some of the liberties that Zack Snyder takes with the character later on. What he does to Zod in the third act. But aside from that, I think it's a really good movie. I think the Krypton stuff is very cool. I think the revisioning of the character is great. I don't know. It's just so visual, and I don't know. I don't understand why people hate it so much. Batman vs. Superman, I understand a little bit more. I just want to mention a close second to this that came to mind when I was looking at this question, and that would be Dunkirk. That's a movie that's out in theaters now. It's not that I hate it. It's just I don't understand why so many people love it. The filmmaking is to be admired. Watching this in an IMAX theater, a real IMAX theater, and seeing it in that expanded aspect ratio, it's incredible as an experience, but as a storytelling experience, to me, it just falls apart and is a bore. I don't know who is who, what is what timeline is what, how they're connecting. It seems like the device that Christopher Nolan uses is clever in theory, but the only purpose of it is to confuse the audience, not connect them with the situation and story. Okay, anyways, done with my Dunkirk rant. Ben.
Something to say during that.
What? Do you want to rebut this, Jack? I know you're a big fan of Dunkirk.
Well, it's hard to rebut because I just feel like we had the completely opposite experience while watching it. Because, I love the structure of it, and a lot of people told me to just look at the title cards, when I went in, and I appreciate the heads up because, I don't know, I didn't feel any confusion during that, and I thought it was a really clever way of taking a week and telling a larger story in a really efficient, lean way with that structure. Because if it just covered the week from beginning to end, I just don't think it would sustain that tension.
See, I knew about the structure going in, and it sounded cool, and I was looking forward to it. That aspect of it excited me the most. But I don't know. Just not for me. Ben, what is your movie?
So I don't know if I'm going to be saying anything incendiary to people on this very podcast. I don't know if we have any lovers of this movie on this podcast, but I despise with maybe every fiber of my being Love Actually. And that's not to say that I don't like Richard Curtis movies. About Time, which was the movie he did, or one of the movies he did after this. It was my favorite movie of, I think, 2013, and nobody really saw that movie. And it's also sort of sappy and romantic in a way different way than Love Actually. But I can't stand this movie. I think nothing about it. I just think it's so false all the way across. And I don't know. Nothing rings true to me. All of the characters are just so poorly drawn, and the romance, the quote unquote romance that is in this movie is, especially from what is his name, Andrew Lincoln's character, is just straight up stalking. It's not cute. It's not funny. This movie is a disaster, I think.
I was going to add, it's interesting, the response to that movie. I remember interviewing Richard Curtis and talking to him about Love Actually, and he was really surprised by just the love that movie has gotten over the years. Because when it came out, it wasn't very well received, and I think it even got really trashed in the UK.
Well, those people know what's up as far as I'm concerned. But I know this movie has a lot of people who are just head over heels for it, and I can't get on board with that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Love Actually. Brad, what is your movie?
I don't understand why everybody hates Love Actually.
I'm not the biggest fan.
I was just kidding. No, I enjoy Love Actually, but no, I went with a movie that I don't understand why everybody hated this movie, and I don't get why everyone hated Zoolander 2. I really am perplexed by it because I saw it and it's exactly what I want it to be. It's just as stupid and funny as the first one. It's just hilarious. I don't understand why people hate it so much. It's very enjoyable, and it's exactly what I wanted from a Zoolander sequel after all these years.
I was bored while watching this.
I get bored listening to you, Peter.
Obviously.
The one thing I do think is funny in that movie is Mugatu's playroom.
Yes.
That's great.
See, I don't even remember that. That's how I've forgotten this movie.
Yeah, it's almost something out of The Cell.
Kiefer Sutherland is hilarious in that movie.
I forgot he was in that. That's right.
I mean, there's so many great things in that movie. Seriously, just It's so funny. I feel like we're all going to come back to Zoolander later and be like, you know what? We made a mistake.
I would bet you money, Brad, that that's not going to happen.
I would too.
Jack, what is your movie?
My pick is Reign of Fire, which is not even a movie I think people hate. It's just a movie people don't even really talk about. And it was just a dud when it came out and didn't get good reviews. But I just think it's such a fun, self-aware B movie. And you have like Matthew McConaughey just chewing the scenery like a beast in that. Like I've been quoting his character for a few years. Every once, like after I saw that movie, he's just so big in it. And I think Christian Bale's pretty good, but the dragon action's cool. I like the world, and I think there's just a lot of fun little details, like when they recreate Star Wars for like kids. Do you guys remember that scene?
No,
I don't remember it.
It's cool.
Yeah, I remember that at all.
Yeah, it's just like obviously no TV or anything, so they tell a story to these kids like a play, and it's the story of Star Wars.
nice.
Yeah, there's cool details like that, and that's a movie. If it's on cable, I'll definitely watch
Jack,
it.
I just think you have a man crush on Matthew McConaughey. You're one of the few people I know that says the McConaughey is not over.
It'll never end. Never ends. I mean, who delivers lines the way he does? I love his way with language.
Moving on, Christopher L. asks, who is going to replace Stephen Daldry when the Obi-Wan movie goes for extensive reshoots? Ben.
I was trying to come up with the most milquetoast director I can think of, the most sort of like boring, middle of the road, average guy. And Peter, you suggested F. Gary Gray for me, and I think that's a good choice. He's one of those guys that, like, I mean, as evidenced by him stepping in to direct The Fate of the Furious, he is like one of those journeyman directors that just sort of comes in and gets it done. But like, you can watch a bunch of his films and never know that they're F. Gary Gray movies. You know, he doesn't have like a unique visual style, but it's clear that he can go into a big franchise machine and get things taken care of and steer the ship. So if that is indeed what is going to happen with this Obi-Wan movie, which I think we're joking about at this point, but really, I mean, looking at their Lucasfilm's recent history, it's not too much of a stretch to think that might happen. I think if Ron Howard isn't busy, they might be wise to call F. Gary Gray.
Well, I think after Stephen Daldry gets replaced on the Obi-Wan movie, it should be by Lord and Miller, because we need an Obi-Wan comedy. No, honestly, I don't know. I don't have a really good answer for this. I would like to see Luc Besson do a Star Wars movie, because seeing Valerian makes me want to see him do more sci-fi universe world building kind of stuff. And I'm not very excited about the idea of an Obi-Wan movie, so I'd love to see Luc Besson take over the Obi-Wan movie. Brad, how about you?
What was Lars von Trier?
Now that's a weird choice.
Well, I mean, ideally what I would want to see happen is Lars von Trier just take it over and just turn it into a story about Obi-Wan Kenobi going on this crazy sex bender where he just is hooking up with all sorts of like women and aliens and all this stuff, because he's been, you know, a Jedi this whole time and he finally has some freedom. There are no Jedi around. He doesn't have to really worry about Luke much. I just want to see him have some death sticks, get some blue milk, make some blue Russians, and just go to town. Just live your dream, Obi-Wan.
Well, they have to explain where Rey came from somehow, right? So maybe.
Exactly. So and maybe that's why it's such a big mystery. Obi-Wan has slept with so many people. You have no idea.
Okay, I think that might be the most unlikely out of the answers so far, and the winner for most likely goes to Jack. What is your suggestion?
Lawrence Kasdan, who is clearly, obviously, in the Lucasfilm, wheelhouse, and I mean, he's made so many great movies to me, and I mean, obviously, Darling Companion and Dreamcatcher's last two were pretty disappointing, but I'm sure he's still got a great movie in him to direct, and I bet he could make a great Star Wars movie behind the camera. And
the only reason he didn't take over Han Solo was because he was a producer and writer, and there's DGA rules that prevent him from stepping in. So this would make sense, especially if he's not involved. Let's move on to a real question. Wendy wants to know what is the best political movie, fictional or nonfiction? I'll start this out. I talked about Election the other day, the Matthew Broderick, Alexander Payne, Reese Witherspoon movie. I know it takes place in a high school and it's about a high school election, but I think it shows you politics on a macro level, and it's just a great movie. It's one of my favorite movies, and I'd also say the documentary Bowling for Columbine by Michael Moore, which isn't so much about politics, but more about it's about politics, but I think that movie is underrated. I know a lot of people like to give Michael Moore crap nowadays, and I know that there are, a couple, I don't want to say inaccuracies, but a couple things that you're not seeing the whole picture in that movie. But I think that is one of the best documentaries ever made, and I think it goes to show you a lot about America, the political system, and our obsession with guns. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I would pick The Ides of March, which is a movie that not a lot of people love, and I've only seen it, I think, maybe once or twice, but I remember really liking it when it came out in, I think, 2011. George Clooney directed this movie, and he stars in it with Ryan Gosling. So I would recommend checking that one out. It's a good sort of behind the curtain look of like what it takes during like the scheming of like an election campaign. And I also didn't notice that this question said nonfiction too, and another option came to mind, and that would be Citizen 4, the documentary from 2014 that was about Edward Snowden and the NSA spying scandal. That was like a pretty powerful, pretty like jaw-dropping documentary. Watching it, I couldn't believe that they had cameras in there and were able to get that footage and sort of put that together the way that they did. So that, I think, won an Oscar for Best Documentary the next year. So that would be my second choice.
I went with Charlie Wilson's War, which I think is a sorely underrated movie. It's directed by Mike Nichols and written by Aaron Sorkin. And what I really like about it is it shows how effective the government can be when it comes together and does something right, but then how ineffective and forgetful they are when it comes time to following up and following through on the decisions they've made. You see that like a lot of Congress doesn't even know what they're voting on. They don't follow through with a lot of things. And with Charlie Wilson's War, you really get to see how big of a mistake the American government made by, helping in this situation, but then not sticking with it and making sure that it was wrapped up properly. And it ended up creating, an enemy that is still a problem for us today.
My pick is Oliver Stone's JFK, which is one of my favorite movies. And I know it's one that's been controversial ever since it came out, and there's a lot of debate over it. But a lot of with the debates over, I just never really care or think about when I watch that movie, the inaccuracies and all that. It's just such a epic movie, and just seeing all those different point of views, and at like a 3-hour runtime, it goes by so fast every time I watch it. And great Kevin Costner performance. I think as that character is presented, just a genuinely good person, just trying to get to the truth. Like, I like a lot of Oliver Stone movies are just about characters trying to get to the truth. And I like how he makes that a heroic act in that movie.
Okay, guys, we're down to our final two questions. Jacob asks, if you could own one movie prop, regardless of money, what would it be? My favorite movie is Back to the Future. I would pick the DeLorean Time Machine for sure. That, like, without a doubt. Ben, how about you?
If I drove a stick, I would say the 1961 Ferrari 250 GT California from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I don't. So I'm going to say Indiana Jones's whip, because I'm pretty great with the whip, you guys. I don't know if you know. No, I'm not really. I've never used a whip before. But I would also like just the idea of like hanging it on a hook on my wall and like having it in case I need it for anything. That's that appeals to me.
That's my only concern about owning a DeLorean Time Machine. It's like, even if you were going to drive that around, right? Well, first of all, it's only 2 seats, so it's very impractical. If you're going to drive that around, like, people could just like key it, like, you know, you would have to, like, you can't even valet. Like, where would you park that thing? Like, it would just be a problem.
You'd have to hide
Wherever
it.
the fuck you want, Peter. Wherever you want.
Okay, Brad, what would you have out of all the movie props?
I also went with a vehicle, and I went with the Ecto-1 from Ghostbusters. A vehicle that is more practical than the DeLorean time machine because it fits like 6 people as well as proton packs and will get me through traffic very easily.
I guess, yes, it's a little bit more practical. Jack, what is your impractical answer?
I was going to go with the alien egg from Alien, but hearing you guys talk about vehicles, I think I would actually go with the Rumbler. I think that's what it's called from Batman Begins.
The Tumbler.
Tumbler, yeah.
Tumbler. Okay. I don't know where I got that from. I haven't watched it in a while, but the Tumbler. Yeah, I just think, you know, if a zombie apocalypse came, that'd be a good vehicle to have.
See, Jack's going to be laughing at Brad when Brad's like trying to put on his, what do you call it? Sirens, and Jack is just like plowing through traffic in his Tumbler.
Run right through that car.
Yeah, okay.
All I'm gonna do is cross the screens, and you know that's it. Total particle reversal. Tumbler gone. Peace out.
I'll just travel back in time, and then I'll be there before all of you guys. So, and
I'll come
Ben will just be
swinging through with a whip, just, you know.
Okay, for our last and final question, Kevin asks, "What's the coolest moment you've experienced while writing about movies?" So I don't think he means like what's the coolest moment while I've been behind a computer writing about movies, because there hasn't been many cool moments that have happened during that time. But I think he means like working on this job. What's the coolest moment that this job has afforded us? And I'm not ready to tell this full story in public yet, but the coolest moment I have experienced in the 13 to 14 years about writing about movies was meeting Steven Spielberg, and he came up to me and grabbed my hand and said, "Thank you, Peter." Like like mind blown for a kid who grew up on movies created by this man thanking me. It was just one of the, I mean, it's not only one of the coolest moments I experienced when writing about movies, it's one of the coolest moments of my life. So yeah, that's it. And someday I will be able to tell that story, but I don't feel like right now is the time.
I'll tell the story.
Go for it. And Brad, you've also met Steven Spielberg.
I did. I was gonna put that down. Mine wasn't quite as fantastic or grand as yours was, but I met him when he happened to be a surprise attendee at Sundance because his godson, Jake Paltrow, had a movie at Sundance, and he was in the audience, and I went up to him afterwards and just introduced myself and, told him how much his work meant to me.
I'm sure he gets that 1,000 times a day.
I doubt it.
And what is your choice if that's not your choice?
Oh, yeah, so my real choice then is is visiting the set of Captain America Civil War. I happened to be on set when they were shooting part of the airport brawl, which is the biggest sequence in the movie. Unfortunately, all of the Avengers weren't there on that day for filming, but all of Team Captain America was there, and so we got to see them running.
Brad, what are you talking about? I saw them running at each other.
Well, there's this thing called movie magic. It's kind of complicated. How much time do you have for me to explain?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I think we get it.
But yeah, so all of Team Captain America running towards Team Iron Man to begin their big fight. It was such a cool experience because even though they weren't all there filming that day, we did pretty much get to interview every single person who was in that movie. I think the only two people we didn't talk to were Paul Bettany and Scarlett Johansson. But yeah, it was it's crazy to be there and to see these actors dressed up as superheroes in front of you, bringing the comic books you read to life, and it's a super surreal experience, and it's just crazy being with all of them and talking to them, and yeah, it was insane. And
I think that's one of the most iconic moments in modern blockbuster history. I've been on a lot of sets, and I have not been a part of watching one of those moments take place in front of me. So I'm jealous. Ben, what is your pick?
Yeah, so I called an audible here at the last second. I met Bill Murray one time during the press junket for The Monuments Men, which is another movie that nobody really saw. But it has a special place in my heart for being the movie that got me close enough to Bill Murray to introduce myself, shake my hand, and tell him that he was my comedy hero. He was very cool and like way more soft spoken than his larger than life reputation might lead you to believe. But it was just a cool moment for me being able to, just express my fandom in like a business, without like fully geeking out on him. I was proud of myself. But yeah, meeting Bill Murray, I mean, how does it get better than that?
How many times do you think? What was
Go
that?
ahead.
I was going to say, how many times do you think Bill Murray hears that a day?
Probably a lot.
I didn't get to really talk to him, but I did a real fanboy thing at Comic-Con because Bill Murray was there one year, and I think for some reason they were promoting Rock the Casbah at Comic-Con that year.
Oh yeah.
And Bill Murray, when he left the panel, he just walked straight down the center aisle of Hall H, and was shaking hands with everybody on his way out. And I was like, I'm gonna go shake hands with Bill Murray. Like, why the fuck would I? I don't know when I'll get to see Bill Murray. And so I went over there and just shook his hand and said hi, and that was it. It's just it's fucking Dr. Venkman.
For next Comic-Con, we should really put together a top 10 weirdest movies that were promoted at Comic-Con list, because
that'd be a good one.
Yeah. Jack, what is your pick?
My pick is Tony Gilroy. I did a phone interview with him when I was in college, and it's just like a small thing that just makes me smile, in that the interview was running behind, and the time got all mixed up, and I was in between classes, and I got a call from him about rescheduling, but I mentioned I was at school at the time, and before the call ended, I remember there's a pause, and he just said, "Get to class," and I just to this day I just still just delight in the fact that I had Tony Gilroy say, "Get to class."
Anyways, if you want to submit questions to the mailbag, usually we're only going to do one of these a day, not this whole pile of questions. Send them to peter@slashfilm.com. You can find more of my work at @slashfilm on Twitter. You can find Ben on Twitter at Ben Pears. You can find Brad on Twitter at Ethan_Anderton, and his podcast on iTunes called Go Flix Yourself. And Jack, we can find you on Twitter at Jack GI?
Yeah.
And obviously, you can find all of this and more at slashfilm.com. We'll see you tomorrow.